It begins in silence, no explosions, no sirens, just the dark waters of the Middle East and the slow movement of shadows across the sea. These are not ordinary ships. They are part of one of the most powerful military armadas on Earth, sent by the United States toward Iran. Aircraft carriers the size of small cities, guided missile destroyers, advanced submarines, fighter jets ready to launch at a moment's notice. Officially, Washington calls it deterrence, a show of strength meant to prevent conflict. But history tells a darker story. When armadas like this appear, they rarely arrive without consequences. To Iran, this is not a warning. It is a threat sitting just off its coast. Inside command rooms in Tehran, radar screens glow through the night. Military leaders study maps, calculate distances, and prepare for scenarios they hope will never happen. Publicly, Iranian officials say they do not want war, but they also make one thing clear. If the United States strikes, the response will not be limited. It will be immediate, and it will spread. That is what makes this moment so dangerous. Neither side is looking for a full-scale war, yet both are preparing as if one is inevitable. And when heavily armed forces operate this close to each other, wars don't always start with orders from presidents or generals. They start with mistakes. A drone flies too close, a radar signal is misread, a commander reacts seconds too fast. In an environment this tense, a single miscalculation can trigger a chain reaction no one can stop. The silence at sea is not calm. It is the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Every ship is on alert, every jet is fueled, every missile is waiting, and once the first shot is fired, it may not matter who fired it. The consequences would not stay confined to one battlefield. Iran has allies and influence across the region, in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. A strike in one place could ignite multiple fronts at the same time, turning a confrontation into a regional firestorm. Then there is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow stretch of water that carries a huge portion of the world's oil. Iran does not need to defeat the US Navy to cause global shockwaves. Even a temporary disruption could send oil prices soaring, rattle global markets, and hit American consumers thousands of miles away. Right now the world is watching. Analysts issue warnings, governments call for restraint, news headlines scroll endlessly, but the real decisions are being made behind closed doors, under intense pressure, where pride, fear, and power collide. The Armada is in place, the trigger is within reach, and the question facing the world is simple, but terrifying. Will restraint hold, or will this quiet standoff become the spark that ignites a catastrophe no one can control? Washington uses a calm, calculated word to describe what is happening in the Middle East: deterrence. In official statements, US leaders say the military buildup is meant to prevent war, not start one. A show of strength, they argue, keeps adversaries in check. The message is simple: don't cross the line, and nothing will happen. But across the ocean, that word sounds very different. In Tehran, deterrence is not heard as reassurance. It is heard as preparation. To Iranian leaders and military planners, an armada of warships moving closer to their borders does not feel defensive. It feels like the opening move of a conflict that has already been decided. This is where danger begins, not with missiles, but with perception. History has taught Iran to be suspicious of American intentions. Time and again, military buildups described as precautionary were followed by airstrikes, invasions, and regime collapse. So when Washington says this is about stability, Tehran hears something else entirely: pressure, intimidation, and the threat of force. Two sides, two narratives, same actions, completely different meanings. American commanders see ships and aircraft as tools to maintain balance. Iranian commanders see the same ships and aircraft as proof that balance is already broken. And once both sides believe the other is preparing for war, every move becomes charged with fear. A routine naval maneuver suddenly looks aggressive. A surveillance flight feels like a provocation. A warning signal is interpreted as a countdown. This is how misunderstandings turn lethal. No one in Washington wakes up wanting a regional war. No one in Tehran wants to invite devastation onto their own soil. Yet both sides are trapped by their assumptions. Each believes backing down would signal weakness. Each fears restraint will be misread as vulnerability. So the build-up continues. More ships, more alerts, more readiness. And with every step meant to prevent conflict, the risk of conflict quietly increases. Because deterrence only works when both sides agree on what it means. When one side believes it is sending a warning, and the other believes it is seeing the opening phase of an attack, the system becomes unstable, fragile, prone to collapse. In moments like this, wars don't start with dramatic announcements. They start with confusion, a decision made in seconds, a response driven by fear rather than strategy, a belief that striking first might be safer than waiting. The most dangerous part is that both sides still insist they are acting responsibly. They both believe they are being rational, and that belief makes compromise harder, not easier. As the Armada remains in place and rhetoric hardens, the line between deterrence and declaration begins to blur. What was meant to prevent war starts to look exactly like the prelude to one. And when that happens, the world edges closer to a moment where words no longer matter, only actions do. In that moment, the question will no longer be what Washington intended or what Tehran believed. The question will be whether anyone realized the misunderstanding in time, before deterrence turned into disaster. Iran's message could not be clearer. There is no such thing as a limited strike, no controlled response, no small exchange that stays contained. From Tehran's perspective, if the first shot is fired, the outcome is already decided. It will be total. This is not just rhetoric meant for headlines. It is a warning rooted in fear, history, and survival. Iranian leaders believe that once an attack begins, stopping it becomes impossible. So instead of promising restraint, they promise escalation. The logic is brutal but simple. If war is inevitable, make it costly enough that the other side thinks twice before starting it. That single declaration changes everything. A full-scale response does not mean one battlefield. It means many. It means missiles launched toward regional bases, allied militias activated across borders, and pressure applied at every possible weak point. Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, places already fragile, would be pulled into the storm almost instantly. This is why Iran's red line terrifies strategists. It removes the safety net. There is no room for testing limits, no space for warning shots, no gradual escalation. Every action becomes all or nothing. And when leaders operate under that mindset, even defensive moves can look like existential threats. For Iran, backing down feels like surrender. For the United States, hesitation can look like weakness. Both sides know this. Both sides fear it. And that shared fear makes compromise harder, not easier. What makes this moment especially dangerous is how fast decisions would need to be made. Missiles don't wait for diplomats. Commanders don't have the luxury of long debates. Seconds matter. And in those seconds, the pressure to respond immediately and forcefully can overwhelm restraint. Iran's red line turns a single strike into a regional gamble with no reset button. Once crossed, there is no pause, no rewind, no easy exit, only consequences. And that is why the world is watching so closely. Because when a nation says there is no such thing as a limited war, it is telling everyone else that the margin for error has disappeared. The most dangerous part of this crisis is not a planned attack. It is the moment when control slips. History shows that wars rarely begin exactly the way leaders intend. They begin with mistakes. In a region packed with warships, fighter jets, drones, and missile systems, everything moves fast. Too fast. Decisions are made in seconds, sometimes by people who do not have the full picture. A drone drifts slightly off course. A radar screen shows an unexpected signal. A pilot believes they are being targeted and reacts instinctively. In that moment, there is no time for debate. What was meant to be surveillance suddenly looks like aggression. What was meant to be defense suddenly feels like an attack. And once the first response is launched, stopping the chain reaction becomes almost impossible. Modern warfare leaves no room for hesitation. Missiles don't pause mid-air. Jets don't wait for clarification. Commanders are trained to act first because waiting can be fatal. That reality turns uncertainty into danger. Both sides know this. Both sides fear being caught off guard, and that fear pushes them closer to the edge. The irony is cruel. The very systems designed to prevent surprise attacks, constant monitoring, rapid response, high alert, are the same systems that increase the risk of accidental war. The more tense the environment becomes, the more likely it is that a routine action is misread as a hostile move. Once that happens, intentions no longer matter. An accidental exchange can quickly be framed as a deliberate strike. Political pressure takes over. Leaders feel forced to respond, not because they want escalation, but because backing down now feels impossible. Pride, fear, and public expectations collide. This is how wars begin, without declarations, without speeches, without countdowns, just one misjudgment, one wrong assumption, one moment where restraint arrives too late, and when that trigger is pulled, intentionally or not, the cost is paid not by machines or strategies, but by millions of lives caught in the aftermath of a mistake no one meant to make. Iran would not fight this war alone. That is one of the most misunderstood and most dangerous parts of this standoff. Any direct confrontation would almost instantly spread far beyond a single battlefield. For years, Iran has built a network of allies and armed groups across the Middle East. They are not standing armies marching under one flag. They are deeply embedded forces, already positioned, already armed, and already watching for signals. Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, each one represents a potential front waiting to be activated. If a conflict begins, it would not unfold slowly, it would erupt. Missiles could be launched from southern Lebanon. Militias in Iraq could target US bases within hours. Armed groups in Syria could strike regional allies. In Yemen, attacks on shipping lanes could threaten global trade. These actions would not require weeks of preparation. They are designed to happen fast, almost simultaneously. This is what turns a single spark into a firestorm. The danger lies in the speed. When multiple fronts ignite at once, decision-makers lose the ability to control escalation. Every response demands another response. Every strike creates pressure for retaliation. And suddenly, what began as a localized clash becomes a regional emergency. For civilians, this kind of war is devastating. Cities far from the original trigger become targets. Airspace closes. Trade routes shut down. Families who have nothing to do with the conflict are pulled into its consequences overnight. For military planners, the nightmare is complexity. Fighting one opponent is difficult. Managing multiple conflicts across different countries, each with its own risks and alliances, is exponentially worse. Resources stretch thin. Communication fractures. Mistakes multiply. This is why the idea of a proxy war terrifies experts. It removes clear lines. There is no single front to defend. No single enemy to deter, just a web of violence spreading outward, faster than diplomacy can react. Once that web ignites, pulling it back together may be impossible, and by the time the world realizes how wide the fire has spread, the cost will already be measured in lives, not strategy. There is one place in this entire standoff that matters more than any military base or battlefield. A narrow stretch of water so small it can fit on a map with room to spare, yet powerful enough to shake the entire world. The Strait of Hormuz. Every single day, a massive share of the world's oil flows through this narrow passage. Tankers move slowly, one after another, carrying energy that fuels cars, factories, airlines, and entire economies. For decades, this waterway has been treated as untouchable, because everyone understands one truth: if the Strait of Hormuz is disrupted, nothing stays normal. Iran does not need to defeat the US Navy to change the global balance. It only needs to create uncertainty. A few attacks, naval mines, missile threats, even the fear of danger is enough. Shipping companies would hesitate, insurance rates would skyrocket, tankers would stop moving, and when oil stops moving, panic begins. Prices at the pump in the United States would rise fast, not gradually, overnight. Families would feel it immediately. Transportation costs would climb, food prices would follow. Markets would react violently. What begins as a regional crisis would quickly land in American homes, wallets, and workplaces. This is why the Strait of Hormuz is so dangerous. It turns military pressure into economic shock. It makes distant conflict feel personal. And it gives Iran a form of leverage that does not rely on winning a war, only on disrupting stability. Once markets sense instability, they don't wait for confirmation. Fear moves faster than facts. Investors pull back. Supply chains tighten, governments scramble to respond, and the most frightening part is how quickly this could happen. There would be no long warning, no gradual build-up. One incident could be enough to trigger a global reaction. That is why every ship passing through those waters carries more than oil. It carries risk. And right now, with tensions rising and patience thinning, the Strait of Hormuz feels less like a trade route and more like a pressure point holding the world hostage. While the world focuses on warships and fighter jets, another conflict is already unfolding, quietly, invisibly, and without headlines. This is the shadow war. And in many ways, It is more dangerous than open combat. There are no press briefings when it happens, no flags, no clear responsibility, just systems going dark, networks failing, and confusion spreading before anyone understands what went wrong. Cyber attacks strike silently, targeting power grids, financial systems, military communications, and critical infrastructure. They don't kill instantly, but they weaken everything a country depends on to function. At the same time, covert operations blur the line between peace and war. Unclaimed strikes, sabotage, intelligence missions designed to send a message without leaving fingerprints. Each action is calculated to stay just below the threshold that would trigger open retaliation, but close enough to provoke fear. Then there is psychological warfare, statements crafted to intimidate, military footage released at just the right moment, warnings delivered indirectly, through allies or media leaks. The goal is not just to threaten weapons, but to exhaust nerves, test resolve, and force mistakes. This kind of warfare feeds on uncertainty. When leaders cannot be sure who attacked them, how severe the damage is, or what might come next, pressure builds. Every system failure could be an attack. Every delay could be sabotage. Trust erodes. Paranoia grows. And the more intense the shadow war becomes, the harder it is to prevent real war. A cyber strike meant as a warning might be interpreted as preparation for a physical attack. A covert operation might cross an unseen red line. Suddenly, retaliation feels justified, even necessary. The most dangerous part is that none of this is visible to the public. While people go about their lives, decisions are being made in secrecy, under stress, with incomplete information, and when fear replaces clarity, restraint becomes fragile. The shadow war is already shaping this crisis. It is tightening the tension, shortening tempers, removing space for diplomacy, and if it continues to escalate unseen, it may be the thing that turns a silent standoff into an open conflict before anyone realizes how close the world already was to the edge. Right now, nothing is exploding, no missiles are flying, no cities are burning, and that is exactly what makes this moment so dangerous. The warships remain in place, engines humming beneath dark waters, fighter jets sit ready on runways, fueled and armed, command centers glow through the night, filled with quiet conversations and unspoken fears. On the surface, the world looks calm, but underneath, tension is stretched thin, like a wire pulled too tight. History warns us about moments like this. The most devastating conflicts did not begin with clear announcements or dramatic countdowns. They began with silence, with confidence that control would hold, with leaders believing escalation could be managed, right up until it couldn't. Every side involved believes it is acting rationally. Every side believes the other will blink first. And that belief is what pushes them closer to the edge, because when no one wants to appear weak, restraint becomes risky. The danger is no longer about strategy alone. It is about timing, about patience, about whether cooler heads can prevail when pressure is at its highest. A single misstep, a misunderstood signal, a rushed decision, a moment of fear could turn this standoff into something irreversible. And once that happens, there will be no clean exits, no easy solutions, no quick return to normal. The consequences would ripple outward, across borders and oceans, touching lives far removed from the original spark. This is why the world is watching, not because war is certain, but because peace is fragile. Right now, the Armada is still waiting. The trigger has not been pulled. The future remains unwritten, but history reminds us of a hard truth. Moments like this do not last forever. They resolve one way or another. The only question left is whether this standoff will fade into memory, or be remembered as the moment when restraint failed, and the cost of a single decision reshaped the world.